Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility.
Hello and welcome back to the Springs in the Desert podcast. This is Cassandra and I'm so excited today because we have two very old friends back on the podcast, our first time in a long time. Andrea and Allie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrea, why don't you start first? Just reintroduce yourself to our audience and just share a little bit about your story and what you're up to these days.
Of course. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be back here with you all. And I worked with Anne at the beginning of Springs in the Desert back in Pennsylvania, and we helped to promote the ministry and was able to attend the first retreat with Allie and Anne and Kimberly as well. So it's been a blessing to work with them in the past. And then I took a break from the ministry. I went into spiritual direction. I got trained in spiritual direction, and that's been my primary focus right now in my life. I've since moved with my husband and my kitty. You'll see her sleeping back there, back to my home state of Michigan. So I am reporting in from Michigan, and I've recently left my job. It's been about a month now. So I am excited to see what the Lord is doing. So.
Wonderful. Yeah. So you guys actually have a winter in Michigan, unlike Allie, who is down in Texas and who I had the pleasure of meeting in person just over the summer. And it was so great. We went to this awesome brewery with our husbands and it was so great. So Allie, why don't you tell our listeners about yourself?
Okay, yeah. I'm Allie Kleinick. I have been married to James for 9 years, and I had the blessing of being involved in Springs in the Desert starting around 2019, I think, right around the time Andrea and I went with Anne and Kimberly to Philly for that first retreat. And I was involved in different ways for several years, including the blog and the podcast. So it's really fun to be back on the podcast.
Yeah.
I recently, about a year ago, decided to step back from the ministry to become more involved really in my parish and in my homemaking life. So I was an engineer for a while. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I quit my full-time job in engineering in 2020 after being married for about 4 years. And I was doing tutoring part-time and some other volunteering. And in the last year or so, I've really dedicated myself more to homemaking and other volunteering pursuits. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because it's one of my favorite topics to talk to almost anyone about.
Wonderful. Yeah. I'm so happy. I think that's probably coming through. Happy to see you guys here on the podcast again. So as you said, both of you have come to a place where you've decided to leave the workforce and give life to the world, as we're always talking about expanding our vision of fruitfulness in marriage, homemaking, volunteering, spiritual direction, and other things. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing with our listeners a little bit more about how you came to this decision and what your days look like on a day-to-day basis. Andrea, why don't you go first?
Sure. So let's see. I worked, for about 30 years, like up until this point. And my last position, or the last 9 years I've been an executive assistant for various organizations, Catholic, non-Catholic, profit, for-profit, nonprofit. And so a lot of my work has been serving others, obviously. And we got to a point in our family, my husband works in cybersecurity and he is such a hard worker. But there's just the past year or so, he's got some underlying chronic health issues and then was recently diagnosed with adult ADHD. And so that's been another kind of hurdle or cross, you can say, that we've been dealing with. But it also makes sense. We've been married for about 11 years now, and a lot of that diagnosis helped me to feel validated in some of our things in our marriage that have come up. Most of the responsibilities fall on me. And whether that's because he forgets or because I'm one to just jump and just do everything. As an assistant, I have that natural, I'll just take care of it mentality, which isn't always the healthiest. So those kind of things collided in our marriage. And I just felt really weighed down. I felt like I was working 2 full-time jobs, managing the house and my job. And also our cat has high needs as well. So I've got a full plate.
Yeah.
So in January of this year, I just had this talk you know what, I either need to look for a different job, part-time or something And so I interviewed for some places, was accepted, but decided it wasn't really a good fit. Then he just said, you know what, can you look at our budget and see if we can make this work to go down to one income? And I did. And I was like, this, you know what, we can sacrifice. There's some definitely sacrifices with us. But yeah, we prayed about it. We were really transparent. I felt like he really listened to me and heard what was going on. But it was hard to have that conversation like that. Like, I'm struggling here. I'm feeling torn between these two. And then also the spiritual direction work I was doing on the side as well. So he's, you know what, with the financial piece, we can make the sacrifice, but also being reminded from the Lord that he called me into spiritual direction. And that's where my heart's been for the past 5 years. And to be able to open up more space in my life for that as well and practice spiritual motherhood was really exciting for me. I was like, that's what I want to do. It just all came together. It was just beautiful how the Lord just brought that clarity and ability to pursue this. And so we had decided that it'd be best to save some money and not just leave my job right in January. So we decided that August would have been the best time for this to work. And so, yeah, that's where trying to remember if I left anything out, but I think that's how we came about it. But just day to day, quickly, since it's only been a month, Allie's more of a veteran in this area. It's interesting because I did a silent retreat this summer, and I was reminded of the importance of having a rule of life, which some of you may be familiar with that term, but it's one that is tossed around in Catholic circles. It was a particular Ignatian retreat that I went on. Mm-hmm. But having a rule of life is really having those parameters in place that you base your whole schedule and life around. So making sure you want to commit to, let's say I want to do daily mass 3 times a week. Let's say I want to do monthly confession or adoration some days. So creating a prayer life that you commit to for the year and then review and assess. But then also practically, I want to make sure I get exercise in. I want to make sure I see these friends each time or my family. So I did that on the retreat. And over the past few weeks, I've been slowly transitioning into those moments. It's up and down and like kind of stressful parts because it's different going from working full time to home.
Yeah.
You don't have a manager anymore or a boss. So I'm left to my own demise and I'm hardcore myself. I hold myself to high standards. So I am like, I'm going to be the best house cleaner. I'm going to be the best meal maker, all of these things. But it's been putting that pressure on me. So I'm learning to just back off of that and let the Lord be my manager. And which means I need to check in with him daily. Okay, God, is this cool with you today? This is what I'm thinking. Yeah. This is what I did today. This is where I failed. This is where I did examine prayer. So incorporating all of that has been really helpful. So every day looks different, but it has those kind of that rule of life behind it.
Awesome.
Beautiful. I love that. I wrote down some of the things you said. I would say that for me, the discernment really, like when I reflected on this, it goes all the way back to childhood when a lot of people talk about little girls playing with dolls and pretending to be little moms. But there's also this aspect of being a little girl that I recall that is playing house, right? Is having the little pretend food and being with your friends and just sweeping the dirt floor in the little playhouse or whatever. So I think as I look back on this, there was always this deep desire that I had to really fully step into this role of caring for the home. And I think that was my best example of that was my own mom. I was really blessed that she was a homemaker and a wonderful cook and still is, and decorated the home beautifully like at Christmas and things like that. And so that was in the back of my mind and my heart. But I pursued a very technical field and became an engineer. And I really enjoyed that, especially during my single years. But for me, as I began to date and then be engaged to and then eventually marry James, I felt this growing desire in my heart. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, right? I don't think a lot of us can relate to that, like feeling that desire to have a family and to be at home with them. So when we got our infertility diagnosis about a year after getting married, I felt this deep like conflict because what I realize now is that I believed this lie really that I could only step into that role if I had children. And so it was hard because I felt like I longed for a slower pace. I wanted to do things that took time, make homemade meals and do slow foods and all these things. But I had a very demanding job with a lot of travel, and I just felt like it wasn't possible. So that was 2017. And I think it took about 2.5 years really of a lot of prayer, a lot of talking to James, very, like you described, Andrea, like very openly and honestly about what I desired and like getting in touch with those desires to begin with, talking to God about them, and also like reading, as you guys know from other things I've said on this podcast, like researching and reading very outspoken women who are blogging about homemaking and G.K. Chesterton on domesticity and all kinds of things to really like get the courage to take action on this. And I also did an Ignatian retreat just prior to making this decision, which was so wonderful in helping me discern where the Lord was really calling me. So so in 2020, I quit my full-time job as an engineer, and I actually did start immediately doing part-time tutoring at that time, but it, because of COVID, became online, so it was a lot less intense than what I had been used to. And yeah, that's how I discerned it. And then for me, like Andrea said, every day is a little bit different, but I find that I love the tasks of homemaking. I love like the meals, and I do make sourdough bread. It sounds very cliche, but I love it. I love gardening. I love taking care of the animals. We have 2 dogs, and we have bird feeders, and we want to get chickens. Like, I love all of that. I love like the cleaning even. I love the slow parts of cleaning, like ironing and mending, and I've learned to sew. So I find there's so many different ways for me to express my creativity in this. And then like Andrea alluded to, I also find that there's a lot of opportunity to grow closer to the Lord through being able to go to daily mass and weekly adoration, and really to spend more time with people. So I'm blessed to have a local sister and brother-in-law and 2 little nieces. I get to spend time with them, and I get to be very involved in my parish. So I might on a given day be doing something for a marriage ministry or youth ministry. And then I have my individual hobbies. Like I like to write. I want to do more writing. So it's definitely slower. And I love what you said about the rule of life, Andrea. I think that is really important. That's actually something I've been thinking about and praying about recently. So I'm glad to be reminded of it.
That's so beautiful. There's some really beautiful parallels too between you. Lots of prayer, lots of conversation. So conversation with God, conversation with your spouse, Ignatian retreats and the discernment of spirits. Yeah. And Allie, I just love what you're saying. Well, one, I love that you got Chesterton in there still, even on this topic of homemaking, that the Chesterton always for you, I know is so. And Chester, your puppy, I will just third on this conversation. We'll third the motion on the demanding pet theme, which is a whole other thing. We'll have to have another whole podcast on demanding pets. But I just love what you say, because beautiful things take time. And when you're under a crush of a work schedule, which I can really relate to right now, it is hard to do things that take time. I do not take pleasure when I have to get food onto the table when it's already 6 o'clock and I don't know what we're having for dinner. I guess it's frozen pizza again. Or Mike, maybe can you do something? And we all have our own things that we struggle with in life. Eating well happens to be one of ours. But I love what you're saying about being able to appreciate doing things that take time and learn these crafts that have been forgotten outside of certain communities. And I will just say that sourdough bread only sounds cliche until you get to eat awesome sourdough bread at home that you made yourself. And as a knitter, I just really also appreciate like taking time to hone the craft of making something with your hands. You're not on a screen. You have something at the end of the day, not the end of the day. I just cast off a sweater for Mike. I've been working on it since like January. But at the end of the task, then you have something that you made by the grace of God who gives us these talents and skills. So also a lot, like we're all facing different barriers, right? Too. A gentle clearing away of those barriers from God and through all that discernment can sometimes make this possible if that's been on your heart. So Allie, let's start with you. What fruit have you seen come from this decision and from your homemaking efforts? I know we've already touched on this, but is there anything further that you'd like to share about?
Yeah, I would say the most immediate fruits that I noticed were peace and simplicity especially in my marriage. And again, I think everybody's situation is different, but for me, I just felt this tremendous burden from all the travel and the schedule that I had. And so I felt immediately like this weight lifted and that we could really have this beautiful complementarity in our marriage, having our own domains. And then I already mentioned the intimacy that I feel like I've been able to grow with the Lord. And especially in what we talk about a lot at Springs in the Desert, understanding my identity primarily as his daughter and not in what I do or produce has been an ongoing journey, one that I'm still working through with him. And then I already mentioned the creativity that I feel like I've been able to step into, and also just greater time for reading and intellectual pursuits is another really a great blessing. And I would say from that too, there's been, I would say, like a healing of the infertility grief for me.
Wow.
Because I had this idea that like being a woman and mom, that was all tied together. And because I feel like homemaking has allowed me to step into these other aspects of my womanhood, I've received healing through those things, and it's ongoing. So I'm just really grateful for that.
That's incredible. Yeah. Andrea, what do you think?
Yeah, similar to Allie too. I think like over the past just month now, I've just had a lot more mental freedom for sure. And I think that you're hitting on that creative piece. I think oftentimes we don't think of cleaning or housework or chores or whatever responsibilities as being creative, but I love that you named it as that. I think it's so true because it does also, it just leaves space for the mind. And I know, especially in religious orders, this is something that they participate in and live in that simple life. And I too felt called to that as well. I think just I schedule my days, but I also, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So there's more flexibility I've experienced. And I'm able to really hone in on focus on what's important to me for once in a way. And that's been a huge blessing, less stress. But I feel like the Lord is wanting me to grow in discipline. And I think that's a big thing, like spiritually, mentally, because when you have the time, it can be easy to push your prayer to the end of the day, or I'll do it in a moment, or whatever. You can talk yourself into those temptations, physically, mentally, all of those things. But I do think at the end of the day, I decided when I was going to do this, that I wrote out a mission statement for my husband. This is what I'm committing to as a homemaker. I don't know. It's not like he asked for it. I just wanted to do it for myself, to be like, this is what where I'm going to put my focus and how I want to serve our household and serve you. And so I think doing that helped me with that like lie or belief of you can't be a homemaker if you don't have kids. And so I think that helped me to just be reminded of that there is mission in this and we have a purpose in it and there's a need that you're fulfilling. That really helped me to overcome that insecurity. And actually, no one ever said that to me. I think it was mostly just within myself.
Right.
I perceived that as like that I'd be questioned by that. If that makes sense. So anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Experiencing freedom there.
I think it's really beautiful that you both have expressed that this decision to stop working and be a homemaker has brought you greater healing in your infertility journey, because I don't know, I feel like we hear people talk about how sad it is that it's quiet at home and that there's nobody else at home. And those things that we hear besides our demanding pets, okay, they're at home. The home is theirs, basically. Sometimes that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
But the fact that you have this freedom for greater prayer and to adopt that discipline for yourself, which it reminds me of something that our friend Stephanie Aquila has on social media has said about having availability to pray the divine office to join in that prayer of the church. And monastic rule is not monastic rule by accident. It's because it's good for the human condition to follow that kind of rule. And to adopt it for yourself now as homemakers, I think is a really beautiful thing. And to lean into the gift of silence that does not always feel like a gift. We understand that. But it can be an invitation to enter into that conversation in the Lord and to have the freedom to do that. So I think that's really beautiful. For those who are either afraid of that judgment that we're talking about, whether it's judgment we're putting on ourselves or judgment that you would hear from family and friends. Sometimes we hear all kinds of things from those people, and this would be like just one more thing we're hearing about from those people. For either that or they're afraid of the economic impact of stopping work, what encouragement would you give to that woman and her husband if they're considering this kind of decision?
I would say first and foremost, pray, talk to the Lord about it, tell him what's on your heart. And then also tell your husband your desire, be vulnerable with him. And husbands, in my experience, want more than anything else for us to be happy. And when we just give them that simple desire, it may not be possible right now. And we do have to release the expectation sometimes for how it's going to happen or when. My experience is they move heaven and earth to make us happy. And so believing in that and trusting in that and whatever timeline and whatever steps might need to be taken for that desire to be met, I would say that would be the key. Pray and talk to him about it, and then trust. And then the letting go of people's opinions, that is, in my experience, like one of the hardest things. It's an ongoing struggle for me, but I think it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to lean more on the Lord and who he says that I am and less on other people's opinions, and to grow in that holy confidence and trust in what he's calling me to.
Andrea?
Yeah, I agree with Allie. I think that was those are really good points. I think for the economic piece, I'm very practical when it comes to that stuff too, like finding a good budget app if you're not budgeting, to be able to really look at this. Money is hard to talk about, but if you're able to do it and figure out within your family if you can make it work, even though there'll be sacrifices made, I just want to say you're worth it. I think that, and your mental health is worth it. Your spiritual health is worth it. Two, if this is a call you're feeling and that you haven't been able to act on it in fear, I would say that one, fear isn't of the Lord. And so to continue to pray through that, but yeah, to just take a look at the budget and to see where you can make some things work if possible. And then I think too, the spiritual motherhood piece is key. And I know that's at the heart of this ministry. In finding, it doesn't have to be like a spiritual direction necessarily, or even a job at your parish, but there may be other ways that you can still practice that within this shift into the home. And that may look like serving the neighbors next door, or babysitting your nieces when, your sister's working, or volunteering at church if you want to, but really focusing on who God has brought into your life in order to maybe answer this call in a way, and leaning into that. Like, for instance, I was at Mass this morning and there were tons of young moms with like little kids. And of course, that's been hard in the past to see, especially during the day. But it just had this thought of, what if a way to do that may not be for maybe some random stranger, but if you do have girlfriends that are in that position, to even help to take them under your wings at Mass. Let me just sit with you and serve you during this time could be another opportunity. And yeah, just the spousal support is key. And yeah, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And the identity piece too. I remember when we were living in Spain, there were long periods where I wasn't working and I wasn't studying like Spanish, or maybe if I was working, it would be like a little bit like remotely, and it was lonely. And I didn't, because we hadn't gone through all of my health catastrophe yet, and because of just some other things and not having grown in maturity, whatever, I did not have this vision of what it means to be at home. And I just remember they have a term called nini. It's like a woman like that doesn't work and doesn't study.
Oh.
And we are wives, we're daughters. We have those fruits of the feminine genius, right? To make our homes special places and to care for others, to receive others, to be generous and sensitive to others. And that is enough. We don't have to have excuses. And obviously, this is all easier said than done.
Yeah.
And it can be very hard to explain and defend when you make a personal decision with your husband and then like this, and then have to justify it to others, whatever. Maybe we don't have to do that. I don't know. But anyway, just want to give a word of encouragement. Yeah, that you're enough and that you're worth it, like you said, Andrea. So for those who aren't in a place for whatever reason where they're going to stop working and stay at home, what advice would you give to them about how to bring a little more homemaking into the home? And I hope that makes sense. Andrea, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so I'm not going to lie. I Googled homemaking and I just wanted to see what the AI world had to say about this. And it was really interesting. It definitely did come across the typical things like cooking meals and cleaning and whatnot. But it did also mention that you're doing these things with intentionality and purpose. And also it did say, quote unquote, making the home cozy, which I loved because I'm a very cozy type person. I will say candles everywhere. I'm just kidding. Candles are my go-to. I think it looks like inviting others into your space. My husband and I talked briefly about when we moved here to Michigan a couple of years ago. We have friends that are parents, obviously. And what if we made our home a place where they could just come and have dinner with us and not have kids around and just to have a space, a haven for them, if you will. I also think of homemaking as serving with love or using generosity of spirit. And I think too, if they're ever in myself, I'm a month into this, but if there ever comes a point where I'm like getting to this like point of contention with it, okay, I gotta clean again, or like where it just becomes too much, I can check myself. I know that's a time where I'm like, okay, wait a second, something's off here. I have to remind myself who I'm really serving and in the Lord. And the Mary Martha scripture it plays out a lot. I feel like I'm both and. So you gotta find that balance. But yeah.
I love that. They're both saints. So, and when you're struggling, you can refer back to your mission statement, which I think is awesome. It's let me revisit my guiding statement. And it's just something that we're obviously familiar with from being in nonprofits. It's so fun and awesome that you can refer to that for your vocation of being a wife and homemaker. I think it's really cool. Allie, what do you think?
Yeah, I would just add that you are a homemaker, regardless of your work status, because you are the wife, you are the woman of the home. And that is part of, I would say, like your God-given role. So we all have different capacities, but I would say just lean into whatever brings you joy. Something small, something big. Maybe it's your thing is cooking. Maybe your thing is singing. Maybe it's filling up the bird feeder in the morning before you go to work, like I like to do. It's this cultivation of appreciating the beauty that's around you, which comes from God. And God made you unique and feminine and beautiful and maternal just by being you. So whatever that looks like, I would just say, embrace it.
Gorgeous. I can't think of a better note to end on. Thank you both so much. If there's any closing thoughts, and then Andrea, if you could just let our listeners know where they can find you for spiritual direction, that would be great.
Oh, thank you. Well, the readings today were just beautiful in this. I don't know if you all saw them, but from Colossians, where it really said, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus. And that just sums up, I think, this role, all of our roles, but just being reminded that's who we are and that's our call, and how that plays out is different for everybody, but being able to find that through homemaking is just a real gift. Mm-hmm. Thank you all for listening and for talking about this. I really enjoy it, and I'll definitely hit Allie up with some more questions, I'm sure, in the future. But no, I definitely am open to doing virtual spiritual direction with women any age. Yeah, my website is visitationofhearts.com, and maybe we can drop that in here too. But yeah, shoot me an email or whatnot. But I would love to chat more about what God's doing with you. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. Thank you, everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you, listeners. We'll leave Andrea's link in the show notes. And just remember that God loves you, and so do we.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.